Nathan meticulously pored over the latest test data, a vital step in his team's progress on the experimental vehicle. The work was tedious but necessary, and he approached it with his usual efficiency, ensuring every detail was accounted for. As he scrolled through the figures, his phone vibrated on the desk. Without even glancing at it, he silenced the notification, staying focused on the task. It wasn't until a natural break in his routine that he finally checked the screen, noticing an unfamiliar number with a local area code. He almost dismissed the message, but something about the timing gave him pause. He opened it, expecting a mundane spam text, or perhaps something work-related. Instead, his gaze locked onto an image that was as explicit as it was unsettling. It took him a second to register what he was looking at. A close-up shot of a woman's intimate parts. Beneath the image, the message read, "Look closely. You still have time. Bradley's. 6 p.m. Nathan's initial reaction wasn't shock. It was sharp, immediate focus. Dismissing it outright as a mistake wasn't an option. He reviewed the image with a cold, clinical eye, searching for any identifying features. That's when he saw it. A tiny mole that was unmistakably Samantha's. His jaw tightened. There was no panic, no emotional spiral. Only clarity and a firm resolve to uncover the truth. He leaned back in his chair, running through the facts. Samantha was supposed to be in Boston for a business meeting, with her flight landing at 4:30 p.m. She hadn't checked in yet, which was unusual, but not completely out of character if she was busy with her team. Nathan sent a response to the unknown sender, keeping it short and demanding. "Who are you? What's your game?" "You'll explain everything at Bradley's." He didn't intend to play along with their game. He intended to end it. Without hesitating, he fired off a message to Samantha as well, keeping his tone neutral. "How was the flight?" "I'm grabbing dinner. Call me when you're free." Grabbing his jacket, Nathan headed for the door. As he approached his car, his phone vibrated again. Expecting Samantha's response, he found instead another cryptic message from the unknown number. "I'll be there, but you might find someone more interesting than me." Nathan's expression hardened. Whoever this was, they thought they could toy with him. They were wrong. Sliding into his car, he mapped the route to Bradley's, a 30-minute drive. It was 5:40. He'd arrived just after 6 o'clock, which would be enough time to confront whoever was waiting. As he drove, another text from Samantha came through. "Crazy time with the team. We'll call you later. Love you." He didn't bother to analyze her words or tone. He had no interest in baseless suspicions or emotional distractions. The facts would reveal themselves soon enough. Nathan pulled into Bradley's parking lot at 6:05. The pub was unremarkable, dim lighting, a modest crowd, but he wasn't here to admire the atmosphere. He stepped inside, his posture confident, his expression unreadable. His eyes swept the room. No one seemed out of place, but whoever had sent the text would eventually make themselves known. He approached the bar, ordered a drink, and sat at the far end, keeping the room in his line of sight. His movements were deliberate, his presence commanding. He was done being played with. Whoever had started this was about to regret it. Nathan's attention shifted to a table across the room as a well-dressed man delivered drinks to a group of smiling individuals. Among them, Samantha sat in her signature little black dress and pearls, exuding an air of effortless charm. Her radiant smile faltered the moment her eyes met Nathan's. Her expression quickly morphed into one of shock and fear, but Nathan's pace remained steady, his focus locked on her. Reaching the table, Nathan wasted no time. Without a word, he grabbed a fistful of the well-dressed man's hair and yanked hard, forcing him to drop his tray and stumble backward, crying out in pain. As the man scrambled to retreat, Nathan released his grip and stepped forward, ready to strike. The man's hasty retreat left him sprawled on the floor, his drink-soaked suit adding insult to injury. Nathan recognized him immediately, Pete. Pointing an unwavering finger at Pete, Nathan's voice cut through the room like a blade. "Stay down." Pete, humiliated and shaken, didn't dare move. Nathan turned his attention back to Samantha, now frozen in place. The lively chatter at the table had gone silent. Every pair of eyes fixed on the unfolding confrontation. Familiar faces stared back at him. colleagues and friends he and Samantha had entertained in their home. They weren't just witnesses to her betrayal. They were complicit. Nathan's eyes scanned the group, his tone sharp and controlled. Some of you have been in my house, shared meals with me. Loyalty, huh? Clearly not to the right person. He briefly considered identifying the person who had sent the anonymous message, but dismissed it as unnecessary. Whoever they were, they had done their part. Turning to Samantha, he delivered his decision without hesitation. I'm heading home. If there's any chance for this marriage, you're coming with me. Now. Samantha hesitated, her mouth opening as if to protest. But Nathan raised a hand, cutting her off. The look in his eyes left no room for argument. She nodded, visibly shaken, but before she could rise, he gestured for her to wait. Addressing the group again, Nathan's tone was laced with cold calculation. He looked directly at Betty and Bob, who were seated nearby. Betty, does Bill think you're in Boston tonight? Bob, does Alice know where you are? The way they avoided his gaze was answer enough. Nathan smirked grimly. Thought so. Seems deceit runs deep here. Without another word, he turned and left, his steps measured and deliberate. The drive home was uneventful, his focus sharp. Pulling into his driveway, Nathan grabbed a beer from the fridge and settled into the living room. He didn't stew in frustration or doubt. He strategized. These weren't the actions of a man blindsided. This was a problem to be solved, and Nathan intended to resolve it with precision. To ensure there was no escape for Samantha's accomplices, he sent a message to both Bob and Alice. Tanya's travel plans changed tonight. You might want to double-check what your partners have been up to. Then he waited. Roughly 20 minutes later, the sound of the garage door opening signaled Samantha's arrival. She entered the living room, her heels and jewelry conspicuously absent, though she still wore the little black dress. She sat across from Nathan, trying to appear calm, but the weight of his silence was oppressive. Nathan didn't say a word, letting the silence stretch. He learned long ago that silence was often more powerful than any accusation. Samantha finally broke, her voice tentative. It's not what you think. Nathan raised his hand again, stopping her. Don't insult me by guessing what I think. I'm not interested in excuses or attempts to justify what I saw. Let's stick to facts. How long has this been going on? How many times? How frequently? Who else knows? Are your friends in on this? Samantha shook her head, her voice rising in desperation. Nathan, it's not like that at all. The team's plans got disrupted. Instead of flying back, Pete suggested we take a down day and stay in town. Nathan's eyes narrowed. I didn't see the whole team there. Where were the others? She hesitated, fidgeting with the hem of her dress. Some decided to stay home an extra night. They'll meet us at the airport tomorrow. Nathan leaned forward slightly, his tone unrelenting. But you chose to stay here and deceive me instead of coming home. And you seemed quite close to Pete. Is there something I should know about your relationship with him? Samantha's voice was disturbingly calm as she began, her tone almost triumphant. For one, Pete's all right. He convinced the owners at Bradley's not to press charges. Nathan's eyes narrowed, his disbelief sharp and immediate. You're defending him? Let me make this clear. I don't care about Pete, his injuries, or his reputation. If he hadn't tripped, I would have knocked him out cold. Charges or no charges, a night in jail doesn't faze me. He smirked coldly. Might even make for an interesting testimony, don't you think? Samantha hesitated, but Nathan pressed forward, his voice cutting. Do you love him? Her composure cracked. She paused, her gaze shifting as she tried to collect her thoughts. The silence between them was deafening, and Nathan let it linger. He watched her closely, reading every flicker of hesitation in her expression. Finally, she stammered. He's not my boyfriend. There's nothing between us. Yes, I should have told you about the change in plans, but it seemed so trivial. Whether I was in Boston or still in town, you weren't expecting me. I was still with the team, committed to our work. We were just having dinner. There was no reason for you to act like that. You embarrassed me in front of everyone. Nathan didn't react to her indignation. Instead, he calmly unlocked his phone, pulled up the explicit text message, and slid it across the coffee table. Trivial, huh? Look at this and tell me again how trivial it was. Samantha's face drained of color as she glanced at the screen. Recognition flashed in her eyes, and her confidence faltered. Nathan's voice was like steel. No more lies. Start talking. She swallowed hard, her bravado fading. Our team, she began hesitantly, is close-knit. Very close. Most of us, you saw them at Bradley's, we've been working extra hard on the proposal. I don't know exactly when it started, but it was after Pete became project manager. We worked closely, and I was drawn to him. Things just evolved. Nathan didn't let her finish. His tone was razor-sharp. Spare me the euphemisms. Falling into bed isn't an accident. You made choices. So how long? 6 months? That's when Pete joined, isn't it? She nodded reluctantly. Nathan leaned back, piecing it together. The whole team? All of you? Samantha hesitated but then nodded again. Pete called it fostering trust and unity among us, she admitted, her tone defensive. Nathan scoffed. Team unity, huh? What's next? Company-sponsored orgies? Don't dress this up as some kind of professional bonding exercise. Her voice grew more defiant. It's more than that. I feel a connection with Pete and the team, stronger than ever. Nathan's eyes darkened, his voice low but firm. Unfortunately for you, that connection may come at a price. You might see some changes in your team soon. Samantha stiffened. What did you do? She demanded, her voice sharp. Nathan's expression didn't waver. Nothing yet, but I let Bob and Alice know that your travel plans changed. How they handle that with their spouses is up to them. I'm not here to clean up your mess, Samantha. I can live with my decisions. Can you? Her anger erupted, her tone defensive and accusatory. Do you have any idea what you're jeopardizing? Our team is the most productive in the company's history, and you've benefited from it too. Just because you weren't part of our meetings doesn't mean you didn't reap the rewards. So I slept with the team, big deal. You never noticed until now, so what does it matter? Nathan stayed silent, his expression unyielding. Samantha's voice dropped into a sneer as she gestured toward the phone. That picture you showed me, you want details? Fine. That was right after Pete finished inside me. Yes, Nathan, he came inside your loving wife. And Betty? She took that picture just before she went down on me. So now you know. Nathan's face remained unreadable, though his jaw clenched slightly. You've been oblivious for months, and now that your fragile ego is bruised, you want to destroy everything we've built, she hissed. Nathan didn't flinch as she unleashed her tirade, her words dripping with venom. If this is what you call building something, he said coldly, then it's already doomed. And as for my ego, don't flatter yourself. This has nothing to do with me and everything to do with the choices you made. Her anger burned hotter. You're overreacting. This team is my life. Pete and I. Nathan stood abruptly, cutting her off with a sharp glare. Enough. I've heard all I need to hear. Without another word, he turned and left the room, his presence still commanding even as he walked away. Nathan paused for a moment in the hallway, his thoughts calculating as he heard Samantha behind him, her voice rising with indignation and panic. She didn't stop there. Her audacity knew no bounds. You're not walking away from this. If you think you can just wash your hands of it, you're wrong. You're going to text Bob and Alice right now, Samantha demanded, her tone turning sharp again. You'll tell them you misunderstood, that I've spoken to you, and that we were stranded in Atlanta with reservations for the morning. Betty and Bill will back me up, and you will too. Nathan turned slowly, his eyes cold and unflinching. You think shouting orders at me will fix this? Let me make something clear. There's no we anymore. You and your twisted team can carry on however you like, but I'm done. I'll be calling a lawyer this week to start the process. 50-50 split. You keep your retirement, I keep mine. It's simple. Samantha's face twisted in disbelief, but Nathan didn't stop. You have reservations in town? Perfect. Use them. Head to Boston. Add another victory to your team's list. Just don't expect me to stand by and pretend this is normal. Her tone shifted instantly, now pleading. Nathan, please, don't do this. If we lose Betty or Bill before the presentation, the company could lose millions. That's bonuses and commissions. Tens, maybe hundreds of thousands for us. Think about what we could do with that money. Travel, a fresh start, just us. Forget this. Reclaim my loyalty. Pete says I'm on track for executive status in a few years. Isn't that what you want for me? For us? Nathan didn't waver. Leave, Samantha. Before she could say another word, a sudden force struck Nathan from behind, knocking the air out of his lungs as he fell forward. A knee drove into his back, pinning him to the floor. Don't hurt him too much, Samantha said, her voice laced with a disturbing mix of guilt and complicity. A familiar voice chuckled above him. Still undecided about breaking your nose, Pete taunted, leaning in close. You've got guts, I'll give you that. But let's see if your pride holds up after this. Nathan's mind sharpened instantly. Samantha must have tipped them off, he thought, observing every detail of his attacker's movements. Pete pressed harder, smirking. Get his phone. Type the text for him. We don't have time for this nonsense. As someone grabbed his arm to pull him upright, Nathan let his body go limp, feigning injury. His weight forced the individual to struggle, giving Nathan the critical information he needed. This wasn't a trained fighter. This was one of Pete's office lackeys, wheezing from the effort of lifting him. Nathan's breathing slowed as he refocused. The contrast between Pete's polished group of salespeople and Nathan's background was glaring. Pete had no idea who he was messing with. Nathan wasn't just an engineer. He and his team had worked closely with the 160th Special Operations Aviation Regiment, an elite unit based at Fort Campbell. While Nathan wasn't a soldier, his role in modifying aircraft for dangerous missions had earned him respect among some of the most formidable operators in the world. Spending time with these professionals meant not only perfecting his craft, but also improving his physical conditioning under their guidance. He thought back to Master Sergeant Troy Baker, a legendary figure in the regiment known for leading successful missions and ensuring every team member returned home safely. Baker's words echoed in Nathan's mind. When the time comes, use what you've learned. And don't hesitate. Nathan shifted his weight suddenly, throwing the unfit attacker off balance and breaking free. In one swift motion, he twisted the man's arm and shoved him into Pete, who stumbled backward, caught off guard. Pete's smirk evaporated. You're full of surprises, Pete said, stepping forward to reassert control. Nathan adjusted his stance, his voice cold and precise. You have no idea who you're dealing with. Pete hesitated, sensing the shift in power. Here's how this is going to go, Nathan continued, his voice steady but commanding. You're going to leave my house now. And if I see you again, anywhere, I'll make sure it's the last mistake you ever make. Samantha's voice broke the tension. Pete, let's just go, she said, her confidence crumbling. Pete glared at Nathan, but didn't push further. He motioned for his lackey to follow, and they left without another word. Nathan stood in the silence, his breathing steady as he locked the door behind them. Turning back to Samantha, he fixed her with a look that left no room for negotiation. Pack your things. You're leaving tonight. Samantha opened her mouth to argue, but the look in his eyes silenced her. She turned and walked upstairs. Nathan sat down, his focus already shifting to what needed to happen next. His phone buzzed with messages from Bob and Alice, but he didn't bother to respond. This wasn't about them anymore. It was about closing this chapter of his life and moving forward on his terms. Nathan leaned down to Pete, who was sprawled on the floor, clutching his bloodied face and groaning. Calm and deliberate, Nathan spoke just loud enough for Pete to hear. You think you're the predator, but you've just been prey this whole time. Don't forget that. Pete struggled to push himself up, his hands trembling as blood dripped from his nose. Nathan stood and addressed the room with a tone of finality. I've been patient long enough. Samantha, pack your things. Pete, take your lackey, and both of you get out of my house before I decide you need an escort to the hospital. Samantha hesitated, her face flushed with humiliation, but Pete managed a weak smile through the blood and pain. This isn't over, Nathan. Nathan smirked. It is for you. Pete wavered for a moment, but Samantha grabbed his arm and pulled him toward the door. Nathan followed them, ensuring they left without incident. As the door closed behind them, he locked it, sealing them out of his life. Inside the house, the tension didn't break. It transformed into sharp resolve. Nathan paced back into the living room, his mind racing. Samantha was upstairs, likely stalling. He decided to give her one last opportunity to make her exit on her own terms before taking further steps. He sat, retrieving his phone, and checked the messages from Bob and Alice. Their replies were predictable: tentative concern and careful deflection. Nathan didn't respond. Their involvement wasn't his responsibility anymore. The memory of Master Sergeant Baker's lessons replayed in his mind. When you're backed into a corner, don't panic. Use your training, your mind, and your leverage. Nathan wasn't about to waste energy chasing shadows. He had all the leverage now, and he intended to use it. Samantha's final plea. 15 minutes passed before Samantha descended the stairs, a suitcase in tow. Her expression was a mix of anger and desperation. She stopped at the bottom step, hesitating. "Nathan, let's talk about this. Just one more chance. You don't have to do this. We can fix it." Nathan's eyes met hers, unflinching. "Fix what? Your deceit? Your lies? Or the fact that you betrayed me and turned this marriage into a joke?" Samantha's voice cracked. "I made mistakes, but we've been through so much together. Don't throw it all away because of one lapse in judgment." Nathan stood, his presence towering over her. "One lapse in judgment? You orchestrated an entire circus with your so-called team-building exercises. This isn't salvageable. Pack the rest of your things and leave tonight." She dropped the suitcase, her tone turning bitter. "Fine, but don't think you're innocent in this, Nathan. You were so focused on your work, you didn't even notice what was happening." Nathan's calm demeanor didn't falter. "And now I've noticed. Goodbye, Samantha. A new beginning." As Samantha walked out of the house for the final time, Nathan locked the door behind her and exhaled deeply. The silence in the house was heavy but welcome. This chapter of his life was over, and he was ready to move forward. Nathan retrieved his phone and composed a brief text to his lawyer. "Need to finalize a separation. Let's set up a meeting this week." The message sent, Nathan grabbed a beer from the fridge and settled into his chair. His gaze drifted to the window, the night outside calm and still. This wasn't the end. It was the beginning of something better. Nathan stood over Pete, who lay unconscious on the floor, his breathing labored, blood pooling from his shattered nose. The room was still, save for Samantha's sharp intake of breath as she stepped back, clutching a cast-iron skillet in her trembling hands. The next moment happened in a flash. Samantha swung the skillet, but her aim was off. She grazed Nathan's side, leaving a dull ache but no real damage. He spun around, caught her wrist, and ripped the pan from her grasp with a single, powerful motion. "Enough!" Nathan's voice was cold, commanding, and final. Samantha recoiled, her hands up in a gesture of surrender. Her tone softened instantly, turning from desperation to persuasion. "Nathan, please. We can fix this. Just think about what you're doing. The money, the life we could still have, it's not too late." Nathan stared at her, the faintest smirk tugging at the corner of his lips. "You're like a chameleon, Samantha. You adapt to whatever keeps you in control." It's pathetic. Misinterpreting his expression as agreement, she moved closer, reaching out to touch him. He held up a hand, stopping her in her tracks. "Don't," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "Not after what you've done." Before she could react, he struck her nose with a swift, calculated punch. Samantha cried out, clutching her face as she stumbled back and fell to the floor. Blood poured through her fingers as she whimpered in shock and pain. Nathan stood over her, unflinching. "That's for every lie, every betrayal. And trust me, it's just the beginning of what's coming for you and your team." The room was eerily quiet. Nathan's breathing slowed as the adrenaline began to subside. He surveyed the chaos. Pete unconscious on the floor, Samantha struggling to stanch the bleeding from her nose, and Bill, Pete's lackey, whimpering in the corner, clutching his injured foot. Nathan knelt beside Samantha, his voice devoid of sympathy. "Let me make one thing clear. There's no fixing this. No amount of money or promises will undo what you've done. You made your choices, and now you're going to live with them." Samantha sobbed, her voice muffled by her hands. "Nathan, I didn't mean for it to go this far. Nathan's laugh was cold, almost amused. Didn't mean for it to go this far? You orchestrated an entire operation of deceit and manipulation. Spare me the crocodile tears. He reached into his pocket, pulled out his phone, and pressed record. You want to fix this? Start by telling me everything. When it started, how far it went, and how many people you dragged into it. Samantha hesitated, her eyes darting to Pete's unconscious form. Nathan's gaze hardened. Don't make me ask twice. Her voice shook as she began to speak. It wasn't supposed to be like this. Pete told me I could have everything: success, influence, money, if I just let go of your rigid ethics. He said you were holding me back, that I'd never reach my full potential if I stayed under your shadow. Nathan's jaw tightened, but he remained silent, letting her continue. Betty, she showed me how things really work in the corporate world. She said that for women, playing the game meant using every tool available. At first, it was just networking. Then it became more. Pete encouraged it. Said it was about building trust and loyalty within the team. Nathan's voice was icy. And you thought sleeping with them would make you a better leader? Samantha flinched at his tone, but nodded. It worked. I got results, Nathan. Promotions, bonuses, recognition. And the team became stronger because of it. Nathan's expression darkened as he processed her words. Stronger? You mean complicit. And you're proud of that? Samantha's gaze dropped, but she didn't answer. Nathan stopped the recording and stood, his posture towering over her. This is over. You've done enough damage, and I won't be part of it anymore. Pack your things and get out of my house. Tonight. Samantha's face crumpled, but Nathan didn't waver. He turned his attention to Bill, who was still moaning on the floor. Take Pete and leave. Now. Bill scrambled to his feet, his fear outweighing his pain, and dragged Pete toward the door. Samantha hesitated, her eyes pleading one last time, but Nathan didn't so much as glance at her. Once the house was empty, Nathan locked the door and stood in the silence. The chaos was gone, but the echoes of betrayal lingered. He didn't dwell on it. Instead, he grabbed his phone, called his lawyer, and scheduled an appointment to finalize the divorce. As he sat back in his chair, a sense of clarity washed over him. This was the end of one chapter, but it wasn't the end of him. He had survived worse, and he would rebuild his life, stronger, better, and free from deceit. Nathan took a deep breath and smiled faintly. For the first time in a long time, he felt like himself again. Here's the continuation of the story, maintaining Nathan's commanding demeanor and addressing the developments in your new part. Nathan's focus sharpened as Samantha continued her confession, her voice both defensive and smug. It started at the company Christmas party. A year after I joined CR, she admitted, a glint of pride in her tone. That's when I realized how easy it was to influence people. Since then, I've been committed to the approach. It's efficient, and frankly, it works. Nathan's lip curled in disdain, but he didn't interrupt. Wait, he said after a moment, his tone incredulous. You're telling me you've been sleeping with Art Vanderlei too? The boss. Samantha's smirk widened. Yes, Nathan. Art, Pete, Bill, anyone on the team who could help me advance. Why not? It doesn't cost me anything to share some closeness. You men are so predictable. Show a bit of cleavage, say the right words, and I can lead you anywhere. Nathan stared at her, his anger tempered by disgust. Samantha, emboldened, continued. Even now, you think you're in control, but you're not. You don't know the half of it. Art already knows where we are. The team's been informed, and they're crafting a cover story as we speak. They'll handle the pitch without us, but the groundwork we've laid will pay off. Nathan raised an eyebrow. Extra effort, huh? You've always been a go-getter, Samantha. She laughed. Effort? That's generous. It was easy. Even Brenda on the selection board wasn't a challenge. A little charm, a little creativity with Pete's help, and she was on board. By the time the contract was awarded, we had the whole board wrapped around our fingers. Nathan's jaw tightened, his contempt growing. So, if it's all set up and running smoothly, why the strong-arm tactics tonight? Why this circus? Samantha rolled her eyes. That was Pete's idea. I told him to let me handle it. I would have come home, pleased you, and made the flight with time to spare. But Pete had to play alpha. And now here we are. Nathan's tone was sharp. Well, you're not making that flight now. As if on cue, Samantha's phone rang. The ringtone was fittingly ironic. Hail to the chief. She answered immediately. Art. Nathan's sharp hearing caught the first words as Samantha put the call on speaker. Let me apologize, Nathan. Art's smooth, businesslike tone filled the room. Pete's actions were unacceptable, and I can assure you, the board will deal with him appropriately. Nathan's lips twitched into a humorless smile. Thank you, Art. I'm relieved to know the board takes fraud and assault so seriously. Art's tone didn't falter. Nathan, these are unfortunate allegations. Lawyers will make their money, fines will be paid, and Pete and Bill might even face community service. But ultimately, you'll be divorced and half as wealthy. Is that what you want? Nathan didn't miss a beat. Do I detect an alternative, Art? Art chuckled. You've always been sharp. Yes, there's an alternative. I've sent something to Samantha's phone. Take a look. Nathan watched as Samantha opened the message. Her face shifted from shock to awe as she turned the screen toward Nathan. The image was simple, Bank of Grand Cayman, and a very large account balance. Nathan raised an eyebrow. And when would that be deposited? Art's voice was calm. It's already there. You'll find the account number in an email I sent you. This has been a bad day for everyone. But this could make it better. Think it over, Nathan. There's no need to make a hasty decision. Nathan stared at the phone, then back at Samantha, her expression caught between guilt and greed. His mind raced, but his outward demeanor remained calm. He leaned forward, holding Samantha's gaze. Art, Nathan said, his tone measured. Do you know the one thing I've learned about trust? There was silence on the line. It takes years to build, seconds to break, and a lifetime to repair. You and your team broke it tonight. No amount of money will undo that. Samantha's face fell as Nathan stood, towering over her. Tell your tech boys they can keep their hush money. I don't need it. Nathan reached for his phone and dialed a number. Samantha's eyes widened as she realized what he was doing. Nathan, wait. But he was already speaking. Yes, this is Nathan Turner. I'd like to report fraud and assault. Federal contract violations. I have evidence. Samantha tried to grab the phone, but Nathan stepped away, his expression cold and final. You made your bed, Samantha. Now lie in it. You can tell Art, Pete, and the rest of your team to prepare for what's coming. This isn't about revenge. It's about accountability. He ended the call and turned to face her. Pack your things and get out. You've got until morning. Her shoulders slumped in defeat as Nathan walked away, his steps deliberate and steady. For the first time in years, he felt like he was in control of his life. And he wasn't about to let anyone take that away again.